Hi, my name is Ade Omituoju with 1863 Ventures, and this presentation is on surviving the recession. It's broken up into three parts: setting your strategy, growing and retaining revenue, and managing cash. And it's really designed to help guide you through the process of determining what changes need to happen within your business and what needs to be true in order for you to not only survive but to thrive. Again, set up into three different components, but we also want to be able to, again, help you gain a little bit of perspective around where we are so that you can set a strategy. And then we've also provided some tools and templates to help guide you. So where we are, these are completely unprecedented times as it relates to what COVID-19 has done to not only global commerce, but the way that people connect and collaborate. I don't think we've ever, in recent history outside of wartime, seen travel, business, and just overall, the financial markets come to almost to a halt, right? But we've experienced this before, and so for 1863, we've been both investors as well as operators of businesses through different cycles. And while these times are unprecedented, they're not uncommon in terms of the cyclicality, in if you will. So we want to be able to recognize the stress that comes from it, but also know that we will survive through this new normal. Now, 2008 was the last time where we experienced something similar to this. It was called the last Great Recession, which the Dow Industrial Average and other equity markets, took a massive hit. Venture capital dollars between 2008 and 2009 went down precipitously. But as we regained control over what was happening in the market, and the government intervened with stimulus, the resulting factor was that money went back into the markets, confidence went back into the markets, and then growth followed. Three areas where we're seeing impact to the space that we're in is in consumption, credit, and investment. Consumption, people are going to be spending less. Each dollar that's spent is going to have a little bit more scrutiny around it. Credit, very similarly so. Now, there is some new stimulus packages coming from the government, so that may actually change access to credit. But from a bank's perspective, there are going to be more questions around the viability of businesses. And same for equity investors, venture capitalists slash angel investors are going to want more data. They may want more favorable terms just because the outlook in the market has definitely changed. These economic cycles are not uncommon, but again, some of the world's greatest brands have emerged from the last recession. So Uber, Airbnb, Dropbox, Warby Parker, all these companies are brands that emerged during or shortly after the recession. So that's to say that you can still start, grow, and scale resilient companies. In fact, some of these companies have been resilient because they've been focused on a customer base with a solid value proposition and a scalable business model. So sometimes when you are battle tested in your business model, that actually provides for a little bit more resilience. So now we want to talk about setting your strategy. It's broken up into three specific points: what your strategy is in navigating this new normal, starting off with your recession thesis, looking for opportunities to grow and retain revenue, and then understanding your cash position and your runway. Again, we want to be able to turn obstacles into opportunities. So we may look at repositioning a conversation with our customers centered on the problem that they face. And we want to be able to give a couple of examples of how this has been done. So Hollow, an online platform that helps brands connect with talent at scale. Their recession thesis was that due to travel restrictions, companies that want to connect with talent can't currently, but they're going to need something that's online to enable them to be able to do their jobs despite what's happening in terms of travel. So Hollow's value proposition was that you can reach talent at a fraction of the cost while also being able to get around the travel restrictions. And so, starting off with that thesis, then they create a point of view to say that, they believe in a new era in talent relations where instead of having to go to a college, spend thousands of dollars to have a desk and maybe get a couple resumes, they're imagining an online engagement with digitally native young talent that allows them to reach more and more people, capture more data, and essentially be able to do their job at a fraction of the cost, right? And so from there, they were able to reposition the product and the conversation with the customer, resulting in a lot of new inbound opportunities. So an example of a consumer packaged good company, Gold. Turmeric powder is great for the health. They have been a rapidly growing direct to consumer company, meaning that they sell online direct to consumer. And so, for them, the conversation is we know that for our customers, A, they're at home and not able to travel. B, they're also really focused on their health. So they felt as if there's an opportunity to have a really authentic dialogue around that, to reposition their product as a way to integrate into their new food routines. So what they did, they started off being very honest with their customers. They felt, hey, let's acknowledge the fact that these are new times. We're not necessarily connected, but that doesn't mean that we cannot stay healthy. And so what they did was incentivize their customers to continue doing business with Gold by offering free shipping. So, being able to deliver on that same value proposition and brand promise direct to consumer while also investing in the customer relationship. Here are a couple other examples where companies have used emails to start a conversation, start a dialogue about what COVID-19 means for them. Care Academy, they do certification training for home health and and extended care community. So for the elder care. So with COVID, there's going to be an increased demand for care providers, of which they want to be able to get more people onto their platform to meet the need for their customers. So they're offering free training, which allows somebody who may have been at home and not able to participate in this new demand for talent to get upskilled and then be able to make some money. Happy, based off of the need to find the right restaurants and happy hours and nightlife, completely decimated in terms of people being able to go to restaurants. But what they did was they pivoted the conversation and the value proposition to do home happy hours. And what that did was say, yeah, we can't necessarily go to bars or restaurants, but it doesn't mean that we can't create valuable relationships between both sides of our customer base, the customers who use our product to connect with restaurants and the restaurants who have great bartenders with a tremendous amount of knowledge where they can do in-home bartender classes. Travel Noir, Black travel site. A lot of people are wondering when they're going to be the first place they're going to go to once the quarantine is up. And so they're helping people rethink their lives and maybe create opportunities to generate their own revenue by being a travel influencer. So what they're doing is helping to upskill people to make money while they're traveling. And as a result, they'll have a new crop of evangelists that are traveling, making money from it, and then also elevating the Travel Noir brand. So now let's put our strategies into action. So remote work policy, if you yourself have a team, or even if you are yourself and a cat at home, you want to set a framework and some guardrails to make sure that you're holding yourself and your team accountable. So what does it mean in terms of communication, number of hours, responsiveness, and time? That helps to set a framework by which you can still get work done regardless of the conditions that we find ourselves in. The next, we talked about it, setting a recession thesis. That is to say, what are the things that need to be true in order for you to survive and thrive in this new space? What's happening with your customers? What's happening in the market? Everything is based off of what this new vision is going to be. And it has to be founded in this new reality. Then we're going to update our projections, right? So 2020 started off with a certain number of which now it's probably going to change. And it's okay, right? Because these projections will help us determine where we can cut costs, where we can shift resources, so that then we have a better handle of our runway and then how much, we'll be able to invest in the business going forward. The CEO dashboard is incredibly important because, every day when you wake up, it should be something that drives your top level decisions and the direction, so that you know what priorities you have from both a customer, product, and revenue standpoint, and you're holding yourself and your team accountable to that. So think about the key metrics and the top three major things that need to happen in order for you to navigate through. And then proactive communication is key, so that for your stakeholders, investors, employees, everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows what is at stake, and everybody feels motivated, that they have a share in the success of the company. So in terms of growing and retaining revenue, yes, it is possible. And it really is driven by, as we talked before, repositioning your product, shifting the conversation with your customer, and making sure that you're reinforcing your value, right? So know what your customers are going through and how you can actually help them through that. And as long as it's measurable, then you can stay top of mind, so that when things are bad with your customers and they're cutting costs, they know that you are an essential component of their business and their survival. Your top customers are going to be critical as well, because their needs and your needs being mutual around solving a particular problem is going to be critical. So incentivize them, thank them, build that understanding and the relationship with them, so that there's a co-investment in the future. And also it reinforces the fact that you can be a partner for them going forward, and you appreciate their business. Audiences are important as well. It's not always about selling, it's about engaging. And authenticity is really key here. So these new conversations, what's happening with your customer, what do they care about, what value can you provide to them, what thought leadership can you provide to them, are things that you should be really obsessive about. Incentivizing purchases. So we talked about this with gold, free shipping. Maybe there's a little bit of discounting that's happening in exchange for, purchasing early. You always want to figure out ways in which you can pull money into the door quicker, and incentivizing people to do so quicker, because that translates into cash flow. And reviewing existing customer agreements is important as well, because you may have found or may see that there's something in a clause that protects you in terms of payment or non-payment, or maybe there's not something there where your existing customers may be able to just not pay. So you need to know these types of things, because that increases both clarity in terms of where your revenue can come from, what is at risk, and where you need to make potential adjustments. As it relates to managing cash costs and cost structure is first, and it's key. Know where you're spending money, know where to eliminate waste. And then from there, looking at your adjusted revenue projections and your expenses, then it's important for us to understand how much runway we have left, as in how many more months can we operate. So some insights around cash management. It's all driven by our ability to understand and manage costs. And then we also want to make sure that we are, taking into consideration the time it's going to take to ramp up and retool the business, right? So it's what can we do today to identify waste and put money towards places where it matters most, right? So let's look at an e-commerce company as an example. So this e-commerce company, as you can see, if we look at their fixed costs and their variable costs, it's $125,000, let's say, per month. That's included in terms of rent, interest expense on a loan that they have, car lease, salaries, insurance. So there's a lot of costs, right? But what we want to be able to do is figure out, well, where can we adjust our spend so that we can improve our profit margins, which means that we're putting more cash into the business. So material costs, we may look at renegotiating our costs with our suppliers. At this rate, anything and everything is negotiable on both sides. Your customers are probably going to want to negotiate price with you, which is fine. And you can do the same thing with your suppliers. We're all in this together. Marketing expenses, maybe instead of doing a tremendous amount of spend on Instagram, we may spend a little bit more time in engaging some of those top customers. Rent, maybe look at consolidating space or moving from one space to another. And then salaries. It's a very tough conversation to have. It's never fun, but being proactive and saying to a full-time employee, I need to shift you to a contractor so that, we can continue to do business and during this period of time and be able to grow. That'll be absolutely critical. Next scenario, let's look at how the current condition will impact our revenue projections. So you'll see here, we've created 3 different scenarios based off of what we think will happen in the future. Now, it's not about being precise, it's about understanding what each scenario will do for us in terms of our cash and also our runway. So we've looked at 10% growth, what that would do, negative 25% growth, and negative 50% growth. And this is a simplified version. You would want to talk to your accountant and or look at your spreadsheets and say, all right, well, what will happen to my business if I only grow by 10%? What will happen to my business if I have negative growth, right? So these things will help us be very clear on what options are available to us, how much runway we'll have, and it'll reorient and inform our strategy. And then next, we're able to project our cash flow. Now, this is just an illustrated example. In the template, we'll be able to play around and put in our own numbers. But this is a visual representation of what we would want to be able to go through in terms of an exercise. Our January balance, or our starting point balance, is $5,000. At the end of June, or within 6-month projection, we'll have $2,700 in cash. But then we see, as our revenue goes up or goes down and our expenses go up and go down, then we have our net cash flow, which is essentially saying how much cash do we actually are we bringing into our account, or is coming out of our account. So if there's less revenue than expenses, then money's coming out of our account. If there's more revenue than expenses, then money is going in. But it's really critical to understand the dynamics of that, so that we see if our revenue goes down by 50%, then how will that actually impact the amount of cash that we have, which will then inform how much runway we have. All right. And then we would put it together in a matrix that shows to investors what the impact to the business would be. And in the template, you'll be able to play around with different scenarios to say, scenario A, no change in revenue with no change in operating expenses. How much runway is that? Scenario B, et cetera, et cetera. So that is all to say, this allows us to illustrate in different scenarios clearly and concisely what that will do to our business in 2 important areas, which is cash and runway. Okay. Inside of this presentation, you'll be able to have access to templates. We'll be sending that out shortly. And these are to guide you and help you understand from an actionable standpoint where you need to prioritize. So there's a template for a recession thesis, which essentially says everything from my understanding of what's going on, to my industry, the problem that now my customer faces, the product that I have, and if there's alignment there, my customers and how they're being impacted, my value proposition, everything all the way down to team and competition. What's happening? What questions do I need to ask myself in order for me to form a thesis and have the clarity needed in order to move forward? Next are customer segments, right? So you probably should have done this already before, but if you haven't, our customer segments are saying, who am I selling to, right? Is it a B2B executive in this particular space, or is it a 27-year-old male that lives in Detroit, right? How are they impacted by now what's going on? Can they travel? How's that impacting their families? How is it impacting their spend? What problems are now arising, or some of these problems now exacerbated? And then what is my value, right? So how can I to my customer segments provide value that is both measurable as well as clear, so that then I have the best shot at growing and retaining revenue. We've also provided a helpful value proposition template here, which is like super simple to say, what's my product for? Who is it for? The name of it, the category, the key benefit, how is it different, right? So it's literally like Mad Libs for your value proposition. And then for those that have a number of customers, you can use this as a way to load up each customer segment, how much they've spent, the number of purchases that they've made, and the average order value. So we can see, all right, well, 82% of our revenue comes from this one segment, right? And of those segments, here are my top 5 customers, and I'm going to engage with them. I'm going to reach out to them, and I'm going to reposition and re-engage with them in a way that I can maintain and grow revenue. And there's also a really helpful cost structure document that says, based off of each segment, so my cost of goods sold, my personnel, my marketing, my admin and operations, where can I cut? So, is that can I renegotiate my shipping costs, or I'm going to cut all my spend on search engine marketing and that agency, obviously travel, right? So, based off of all these different areas, I can potentially save 33% on my operating expenses, which has a significant impact to my bottom line. And then finally, there's an investor update, investor template, which can help prime the pump in terms of your thought process and communicating what's going on with the business, what is the perspective and projection around revenue, how much runway you have, and what the ask is. And so, the goal with this is to give you a framework of thought so that you can start to ask yourself the right questions, that then you can put a thesis and a strategy and a framework together so that you can navigate this space, lead with value. Again, we fundamentally believe that you have the potential to be one of those great companies that have come out of this space battle tested and with a strong value proposition and customer base. So we have been, we're built for this as entrepreneurs. We are built for these challenges, and fundamentally we hope that this template is something that can be helpful to you. Feel free to reach out to us. Anybody on our team will be sending out the presentation shortly, and we hope that this has been helpful.